I now would like to welcome you to our webinar. My name is Lisa Chapman. I'm the class of '81 MBA Yale, and I'm chair of 1stGenYale. It's exciting to have you, Yale students, alumni, and friends, join us for our program, Developing a Strategy to Transition Careers. We have over 140 participants who have signed up today, who are from Yale College, Yale School of Management, Yale Law School, School of Public Health, as well as current students, recent graduates, and alumni back to 1971. We also have friends from other universities and colleges who've joined us today. We represent doctors, lawyers, artists, those in finance, fundraising, and nonprofit. Many of you are interested in going from the private sector to the public sector. Some are interested in going from the nonprofit sector to the private sector. Some in technical jobs would like to go into social media or indirect service. We're glad to be back. This is our second webinar related to careers and finding and changing careers in this economy. And we want to thank you for your interest. Michael Watson, class of '81, majored in economics, Yale College. He's the Deputy Director in Human Resources of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Michael will share his experience in over 40 years of diverse careers and a specialty in human resources. Also talk about his journey from Yale to his first job in sales with IBM, to his current position in the public sector today, where Michael oversees a human resources team that provides support for approximately 8,000 employees in 2 states, New York and New Jersey. Prior roles Michael had include being Senior Vice President of Talent and Culture for the National 4-H Council, Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Diversity for Girl Scouts of the USA, IBM Global Services, Time Warner Inc., and GE Capital. Michael also has chaired and has served on a number of boards, including serving on the Manhattanville College Board, the Robert F. Kennedy Children's Action Corps, and 1stGenYale. Michael chaired the National Human Services Assembly and Human Resources Council and was former board treasurer of the Nonprofit Workforce Coalition. He also has a master's in science and organizational management and human resources from Manhattanville College. Michael will be presenting tonight with Robyn Acampora, who is the Yale's Office of Career Strategy, Director of Strategic Initiatives and Public Service Careers. And she will share how to position yourself for success in today's competitive job market, especially now transitioning to new careers. Robyn joined OCS in the fall of 2012. But prior, Robyn worked at the Yale Law School and the Career Development Office, working on a number of public interest initiatives. Robyn's job includes overseeing the Common Good and Creative Careers team at OCS. She manages all the public service fellowships, including the Yale Alumni Community Service Fellowship, Yawkey Fellowship, and the Domestic Summer Awards. She also is liaison for all Yale student athletes. Now, if you want to change your life by pursuing a different type of work, you have come to the right place. Our distinguished panelists will discuss with you how to develop a strategy to make the move from a job that no longer inspires you to a career of meaning. You will leave this webinar with concrete steps how to make this transaction happen for you. Now it's my pleasure to turn our program over to our distinguished panelists, Michael Watson and Robyn Acampora.
Good evening, everyone. We look forward to working with you this evening. Just take me a moment to bring the appropriate screen up. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about 3 things. We're going to talk about planning a career move, updating your resume to the new industry, and we're also going to talk about how to interview and go through that process as well. So all 3 of those areas we're going to discuss this evening. First, planning a career move. The first thing you want to do is think about why are you interested in this new career, and really think about why. Is it just because you're upset with your boss? Or is it just because you don't like the current organization that you're working for? You really want to think these things through before you want to do something that is a significant step, which is actually changing careers. And you want to think about, what are the benefits to you? Will it improve your life? Will it increase your satisfaction? Will you make more money or less? Will you have more free time? All those kinds of things you want to think about in terms of deciding whether you want to pursue another career. And that may make you either more motivated or less. And just so that you know, for those of you who take notes, we're going to send a copy of the entire presentation or make it available for everyone after this webinar is over. The key thing is you want to make sure you understand what this career is about. I mean, I know people who've gone to graduate schools, to law schools, and other places, and finished it, and then they figured out that's not what they wanted to do. So you really, if you want to change careers, you want to learn as much as you can about the career that you intend to pursue. You want to talk to people and really learn about what their day is like, what their challenges are, what they like and what they don't like. Is there demand for this field going forward? What are the specific skills you're going to need? So, and the other thing you want to think about is, do you have any baseline career skills that will help you in this career that you want to pursue? Do you have contacts? Are there previous employers you can help? Are there skills that you have that are special? And again, there's places where it might be easier to make that change. Like, for example, there are some companies and organizations that are very open to moving people from one career area to another if you're a high performer, or if you build a relationship with people in other departments. Are you working for a company like that? If you are, that might be an opportunity to make that transition from within a company, which might be easier than changing organizations as well as changing careers. Key thing is you want to make sure you understand what skills you're going to need. If you want to go into medicine, you need a medical degree, and you know how many years that may take. In other areas, it might mean taking 2 or 3 programming classes. In other areas, it might mean a certification of some sort. You want to make sure you have the details of what it will take for you to go from where you are to where you want to go. So as you talk to people, make sure that you show them your current background so they can help you bridge that gap into knowing what you would need to do. And that way you know what kind of investment you want to make. Do you want to go back and get a business degree and do the borrowing required to do that? Are you willing to invest the time to go back and get a medical degree? Are you willing to take the time in the evenings to get a certificate or take other classes? These are the kinds of things you want to think about, and you want to put the money aside to do these kinds of things and the time. So think about all of that as you decide whether or not you want to make this career change and what it will take to get there. Then once you figure these things out and you decide, I still want to do this, then it's a matter of building a plan. And then it's a timeline. You know, how do you want to do it? You know, weekly goals, monthly goals. What do you want to accomplish? Are there certain tests you need to take in a certain time range? Are there certain skills you want to acquire within a year? Is there certain volunteering that you want to do within the second year? All those things you want to identify and break it down into major milestones. And that way you'll have an overall plan in terms of how you want to go from where you are to the career that you want to go. Because think about how long this pandemic has been going on. A lot of people have utilized that time to create a whole new career option for themselves. The time is going to pass by anyway, so if you use it wisely, you can move more quickly to where you want to go. And the key thing is obviously tracking. Tracking will be very helpful because, again, knowing what you're doing and when will be very helpful to understand what your goal is going to, when you're going to get to your goal. Put the reminders there if you need to. Use Excel, use a paper pad, use a calendar, whatever works for you in terms of tracking your efforts, because you want to measure what you're doing and you want to make sure that you stay on track, and you want to recognize if you fall behind. Essentially, what you want to do over time is you want to recreate your brand. You want, when people think about people to refer to search firms and others regarding a particular career, you want your name to come up. And when your name comes up and they look at your LinkedIn profile or your resume or anything else, it should all say, oh, this would be a great candidate for a position in X or Y, marketing or communications, or whatever that would be. And I think the key thing here is you want to build these things over time. That's why the certifications and the education or whatever that's required and the volunteer work will be very important in terms of building that brand image so that people recognize you instantly for someone who's a candidate in this new field that you want to enter. Another thing is to ask friends and family and others for help. If people don't know that you want to make a change, they can't refer you to new opportunities. So that means letting family members know, letting old contacts know. There may be teachers from high school who may be married to executives in nonprofit organizations or government. You never know who's connected to whom until you let people know what it is that you want to do. And another hint is to be as specific as you can. Just to say generically, I want to work in a nonprofit is too broad. I want to work in a nonprofit. Do you want to work with children? Do you want to work with homelessness? Do you want to work with in the arts? The more specific you can be, the better. In fact, if you can say, I'm very interested in opportunities at the Salvation Army or the YMCA or something as specific as that, it will sit in people's minds, and that way if they know people or run into someone who has a contact there, they can make that connection for you and it'll be a lot easier. Networking is critical. People who are in the field that you want to go to need to know who you are. They need to know that you're interested. Everything from informational interviews, going to conferences, going to roundtable discussion groups where people are in that group, in that field, being there, learning the language, seeing what the issues are, what the challenges are. That will help you be a lot more comfortable when you're doing your interviews and everything else. And you want to build relationships with people. And you want to make sure they know that you're interested in making a change and what you have to offer. And that way, when opportunities come to mind, if you've built those relationships, they will be able to give you a call and say, hey, there's an opening here or someplace else. Or this search firm is looking for people to do X or Y. So that's what you want to do in terms of building your overall process in terms of your network. The last thing I'll say is that before we go to updating your resume is a number of people make these transitions every year. And it can be done. You just have to have a plan. And so what I'm now very pleased to do is I'm going to introduce Robyn. She's going to take you from updating your resume to the new industry and take you from there.
Thank you, Michael. Just give me one moment. Okay, so as Michael mentioned, taking the time to really plan how this move is going to happen is so critical. At the end of Michael's talk, though, he was mentioning the networking. And the minute you start networking and you start talking to people, they are going to say to you, right, can I see a copy of your resume? So this is a natural transition that as you're plotting everything and realizing that this is the area that you want to go into, that then you got to start looking at that resume. And what you're going to be doing is taking your old resume and really shifting it completely. So a lot of people have heard of this term before, transferable skills, and it's an important one. You're connecting the dots. So I actually love this definition. It's a strategy. Transferable skills are a strategy allowing you to use the exact same experience and make it relevant to other industries, right? Because that's what it's about. So you are going to be taking that resume and looking at your descriptions. You're going to be looking at your statements, the way you describe past jobs, volunteer experiences, et cetera, and really shifting it to where you want to go. What is the industry that you want to go into? And I should just mention that, overall resume advice, I just have to say this as a career advisor, you don't want to be using a job description. You don't want to be just saying like responsibilities included XYZ, or my tasks were these 3 things. You want to go a lot deeper and you want to show how you made things better. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but just wanted to mention that, and also mention whatever I'm referring to here about changing your resume and updating it for this new career path, you should also do the same thing with your LinkedIn profile. So your LinkedIn profile should include all these great new descriptions. It can even at the top say in the headline something like, seeking positions in, and put the new industry. So LinkedIn makes it pretty easy for you, but you do want to use that tool and not just put that to the wayside. So you got to update the resume and then also do whatever you're doing on the resume to LinkedIn. So the example here on this slide, what I'm trying to show is just how you can literally take a line from a resume for an old position, or old industry that you were in, for example, sales, and then transition it into other industries. So for the sales resume, you can see it says prepare and deliver presentations and provide solutions to customer inquiries. Then you could take that same accomplishment and move it to copywriting, right? So created content for and presented a pitch deck that secured a $4 million deal. So you're focused more on the creation there. And then take the same thing for product management. Create business cases to influence partners about the potential product market fit and prioritization. So for that, if someone's moving to product management, they're looking at the trends, they're looking at keywords, and product market fit, partners, those are all important words. Those are ways that the employer is going to recognize that you are aware of the new industry you're going into. I also think it's worth mentioning that if you are looking to go into operations, then certainly you want to show problem solving. That's a big part. So another example here is from an old sales resume that you might have, if that was your former industry. Talk more about the onboarding, right? So train and onboard a team of 4 sales coordinators recognized by regional sales director as exemplary. So this is the type of way that you can really focus on the future. Accomplishment stories are a big part of any resume, but especially when you're looking to transition careers. So what you're trying to highlight is what the impact is that you're making and how you're adding value. This is what the employers want to see, right? So these are a couple of questions. We have a whole list on our OCS page and on our accomplishment stories page. At the end of this presentation, I'll share that link. But these are a couple, and I'll just read a few more that I have. You want to really question what you've done. And by doing that, you're going to come up with the most compelling statements, right? So we've got, have I ever improved something? Achieved more with fewer resources or money? Have I reduced costs? A couple others, have I saved time? Have I designed or developed a new process or a new product? Have I solved a pressing problem? Have I managed or led a team? Have I successfully multitasked, dedicated long hours of work to accomplish something within a short time frame? What am I most proud of? What would others who I've worked with say about my contribution? Right. So really digging into like, what am I gonna put down on this piece of paper and on my LinkedIn profile that's going to show the most compelling argument for why I'm the best fit for the position. And these are just a couple formulas that I often work with when folks are trying to figure out how to compile these accomplishment statements. So writing it out. So you got the action verb. You want to do a compelling action verb. Then what is the problem that you solved? And then what's the result? And you always want to quantify when you can. Another method is to say, leading with the impact you delivered. So explain the impact and then numerically measure it and then explain how you did that. So that's another way of kind of framing this. Just a little more on accomplishment statements. So this is an example of just showing how you can really beef up a description of your work. So before, we have looked at branding and marketing strategies of company X in comparison to competitors. And then after, it says compiled an overview of the competitive landscape for company X by conducting over 50 expert interviews and online research. So you can see right there, right? We went from looked to compiled. Compiled is a much more compelling action verb. We've got more of a focus on the process. So the fact that we did expert interviews and online research, we quantified it with the number 50, and those little things make a big difference. Overall, you want to just pitch your skills, right? So again, those transferable skills that the future employer is going to value. And you always want to be specific, use powerful action verbs, and quantify your impact. And also, you want to contextualize the situation for the employer to make it easy for them to understand what you've done at that previous position. So Michael mentioned before about, you might need to invest in certain training. And, essentially what you just want to be aware of is making sure that if you do have new training, new certifications, that type of thing, you want to add that in the education section, which makes sense. If you do have a LinkedIn profile, which I would encourage everyone to do, there's actually a section within LinkedIn that is just for certifications. So that makes your life really easy. You just throw in the certifications there so that employers can recognize them. I would also say that if you have anything in terms of like software systems, database systems, experience from prior jobs, don't be afraid to put that in with the work experience and explain that. Because a lot of times I've talked to people who say, oh, I didn't think that it would matter, that I knew like LexisNexis. And actually, just showing and demonstrating that you're aware of some software systems and that you've used them can be helpful, even if it's not the one that that particular employer is going to be using. And then again, if you ever have data experience is so relevant for so many employers now. You want to explain that data experience. Did you evaluate? Did you analyze? Did you clean up data? Did you present data? Anything like that would be important. So besides the items that are already on your work experience section that you're trying to convert to this new career path, and as you're transitioning, the other thing to consider is what you do outside of work, right? Like outside of 9 to 5, what are you doing that actually might be relevant? I can give a couple of examples. I was talking to someone who was actually an accountant and they were looking to go into education. And when we were talking about their resume and their experiences, I just happened to ask him, what did you do? What are you doing on the weekends? And he mentioned that he is a Sunday school teacher, right? So that was just under his volunteer skills section. It was just said the position title. And when we talked about it, we realized that's actually makes a lot of sense to put in the work experience section. Talk about what you did. Did you plan lessons? What's the age group? How many students did you have? Right? All of that stuff is relevant for the new position. So don't be afraid to really look at something you might have as a volunteer, extracurricular, and put it as work experience. The other thing is don't worry if it was paid or unpaid. That does not matter. It can still go in the work and professional experience part. So once you kind of gone through the resume and you feel good about that, you're going to get you're going to get to the next step, which is amazing. And that means you get the interview, right? So once you have this interview, then you need to start preparing. And I would say you want to prepare even more than you would for a typical interview, just because it is obviously a new career path. It's going to take practice. You can do mocks. You can ask friends or family. You can ask your career services office to just do some mock interviews with you so you can practice this more and more. Because you want to be able to explain this career change as best as possible. Obviously, I think most of us know what an interview is, right? But you have to convince this employer that you're the best candidate. And it may sound corny, but if you don't believe you're the best candidate, they're not going to believe it. And that's the truth. So you need to take the time to really, as Michael mentioned earlier, really consider why you're going into this. What's the desire? What are the reasons you're doing it? And you need to own that, because that's going to be important for the interview. Also, you're going to have to describe your work experience differently than you have in the past. Your work experience is not changing, right? Your history is your history, and that's fine. But the way, again, that you highlight the transferable skills and you approach the different questions, that's going to be what's going to make the difference and convince the employer that you're ready for this new career path. In terms of, how to approach this, I would say get a list of all your work experiences, all the volunteer experiences, list them out, put the tasks, put the accomplishments. Don't get caught up in what industry they're in. Just write them all down, because what's going to happen is that's going to help you identify examples. And as I would say, the devil's in the details, right? So getting those details is what's going to convince the employer that you know what you're talking about. Just examples here, the problem solving one, describe an innovative solution that you came up with. Even if it's a completely different industry, that's okay. But it's still showing that you can accomplish the task that's needed. So bringing evidence is definitely something that some folks are not familiar with and might feel a little uncomfortable with, but I think it's a great way of showing, how else you're capable of taking on this new industry. Whether it's, a proposal, a marketing plan, showing your certificates, that type of thing, that shows that you care and that you took the time to do that and that you're serious about this. I have an example of somebody who was applying for an opportunity in an institution I was working at, and they had never been in education before. So they brought some examples of like marketing flyers that they thought our students would be really interested in. And that showed me that, they took the time to figure out what was pressing for our office, how they could develop the right materials that would attract our audience. And it was impressive. So it really is going that extra mile that's important in these type of situations. I know somebody else who had been going for a teaching position that they didn't have any really formal teaching experience. So they created a mock syllabus of what they would, do for a class. And that was really important. And then of course, everyone is not going to meet every criteria, and that's okay. And you don't want to, you don't beat yourself up for that, right? You want to highlight the things that you can make the transferable skills to, that you can connect the dots to. And the other things, you can acknowledge them, but you can also then give an example of how you're a quick learner. I love this line: although there may be some initial adjustments, I can pick it up quickly based on my skills, right? So then it goes right back to the positive part of how I've done stuff like this before. I've been in new situations. I can handle this. So you acknowledge it, but then you move on. And of course, I am 99% sure that they are going to ask you why you're making a career change. Why are you making a career change at this age? What's your motivation? And again, if you've taken the time to really research and to really dig into why you're doing this, this should come pretty natural to answer. The important point is to plan ahead, to practice whatever you're going to say. You don't want to go negative, right? So you don't want to badmouth the industry. You don't want to badmouth a previous boss, but more, could be something about like, well, I'm really ready for a new challenge. I'm ready to take on this other area. And then you can show that you've done your research. So you can talk about like what's trending in this new industry that you're really excited about. So you always want to keep it simple and looking towards the future. I think that's what's really important. And then lastly, these are a couple of the links. So these are, I mentioned the accomplishment stories and having action verbs. We have some great resume action verbs on that link, and this PowerPoint would be shared with everybody, so you're welcome to use it. And then also, Michael talked a lot about networking, and I just wanted to mention we have a great informational interviews page, and that's got even sample emails, like how to approach someone, what to ask. And I will now stop my share and turn things back over to Lisa.
Thank you, Robyn, and thank you, Michael. Wow, okay, that was unbelievable. Now we're gonna open it up for question and answers from our participants. So if you all could just go to the chat feature and type in your questions, comments, I'll read them, and Michael and Robyn will give it their best shot to help you on your way. One of the questions to start off with for Robyn and Michael is, how do you, given the motivation of wanting to change careers but currently in a job or a profession, but wanting to get out of it and do something differently, how do you keep your skills up to make that transition successful? Obviously there's limited time and resources, but in terms of learning new skills or some of the things that Michael had touched on, how do you manage to be able to do that at the same time?
I'll start out. There's a couple of ways to think about it. One is to build the skills on the side. Obviously, that's going to take a sacrifice in terms of time. And also, if you have any breaks, like one thing I had done one year is I took a sabbatical for a year, and I was able to do a lot of volunteer work. And that was very helpful in terms of building a set of skills. That's not why I took the sabbatical, but I built a set of skills that made me more qualified for opportunities in the nonprofit sector. But the key thing is that it's going to take going above your hourly, whatever it is, how many hours you work. You're going to have to go above and beyond that to build a skill set for a new career area. There's no way around it. Obviously, keep your current skills up in your current job, but whether it's pursuing a certification or anything else, you have to make the sacrifice to build that other skill set. Robyn?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Like, you're going to have to make sacrifices, and that's certainly going to be one of them. Is you're going to have to put extra time and extra effort into this new skill, this new career path, etc. So there's not, I can't sugarcoat that and say there's like an easy way to do that. You just want to make sure they're the right skills, right? So that again is why talking to people beforehand and really doing your homework, because the worst would be if you went and got a master's degree and then realized, well, that's actually not the only way I could do that, right? Like, it could have been a lot easier. So talking to more people before you start to decide which skills that you really need to hone in on, I think is an important part as well.
Okay, that's great. Okay, let me go down to where we are. People are talking about customizing the resume for the job, but my past experiences don't change. What specifically should we be changing to adapt a resume to the job?
Sure. So
thank you for your comment.
Yeah. So what you should specifically be changing on your resume for the job is looking at the new job, looking at the description, identifying keywords, talking to people who are in these industries, finding out what's important. And then it's not that you're changing what you've done in the past, but you're highlighting different parts of it. And that's what I was hoping my slide would kind of show, but I know it's hard with just a couple of examples. So, you know, it's going to take digging into the future, looking and talking to people, what is needed, and then going, okay, let me really reflect. I'm sure I did parts of this, even though the industry was different. So it's not, you know, it's not the easiest thing, but you'd be surprised if you just start to kind of look and do the research about what's going on in the future and what those positions are and how you can update your accomplishments. Just change the angle. Look at it a little differently.
And you might be surprised in terms of how many of your skills are transferable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think don't underestimate that. Your ability to persuade, your ability to write, your ability to present complex information. A lot of the skills that you have in your current job can be used in a wide variety of different fields and career areas.
Thank you. A question that has come to me via email. So it's not in the chat, but I'm reading it from my cell phone, which is, what do you do in the interview if someone wants to be sort of tough? Sometimes the recruiter or the interview will throw out a question that's a little edgy or a little, not controversial, but to see how I would react. How do you deal with that? If it's a comment you find offensive or a comment you find that's inappropriate and they're sort of testing you, how do you deal with that inside an interview? And then what do you do afterwards?
I think I'm going to defer to the HR professional on this one, if that's okay.
Michael?
Well, I think that the key thing is if it's a question that you're able to, if it's an illegal question, then that's one thing.
Mm.
But the second thing is that if it's a tough question, you know, answer it as best you can. I mean, if they ask a question that requires a complex answer, you do the best you can with that question. Do not hesitate to say, give me a moment to think about that. Mm-hmm. Do not rush yourself into a bad answer because that's what they're going to remember. But also remember that the questions that they ask are also reflections on, is this an organization that I want to join? Is this a set of people I want to work with? If their whole purpose in the interview process is to trip you up, is that the kind of environment you want to be in? So as you're interviewing, know that you're interviewing them as well as they are interviewing you. And if it's something that you just don't feel comfortable answering, you can say, well, I don't feel comfortable answering that question. I mean, because I know a long time ago, I worked with some employees and some managers who would ask women, or they wanted to ask women about their childcare arrangements and all kinds of things and how many children they plan to have. Those are and were illegal questions. They just didn't know. Mm-hmm. So again, don't allow yourself to be pulled into answering things that are illegal, and just do the best you can. But also know, use that as a judgment. Is this the kind of employer I want to work with?
Michael, where do people go to find the list of illegal or inappropriate questions before they go into, so they're prepared about childcare, or are you married, or what is your sexual preference, or where does someone go to find that information?
A great place is one of the most powerful organizations in the world. It's Google.
That's Google.
All you have to look up is examples of illegal interview questions, and you'll get a variety of articles, specific questions that managers should not ask. And you can even type in the search that says questions managers should not ask during interviews. How to handle an inappropriate question during an interview. Just put in those search specs, and you'll get a wide variety of responses, along with specific examples on how to manage your answers to those various questions.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Another question, should or can we keep our resume broad if we're not sure which career field we're yet interested in?
The only thing I would say, and Robyn, obviously feel free to jump in, is that recognize that given the economy, you're competing against, if you're trying to change career fields, you're competing against people who have very narrowly focused themselves in the career that you're in. So that's who you're competing against. So if you're trying to change careers, you want to have your resume as customized as you can to show that employer I'm worth taking a risk on in terms of making a transference from the career I'm in to the career that you're applying for. So I think customization in most cases will work. If you don't know what you want to do, that's something different. I would find that out. But I think just having a few versions of your resume may be helpful, or at least be able to describe things clearly enough in the cover letter that you can tell the employer where you're aiming toward. Robyn?
Robyn? Oh, is Robyn on mute? Robyn?
I think we lost her for a moment. She'll be back momentarily.
Okay. Wonder where she, okay. Wonder.
You can go to the next question and we'll
All
come
right.
back to Robyn.
All right, let me go to the next question. Sure. Maybe she lost power. Next question. What are the pros and cons of making a LinkedIn read like a resume instead of a narrative? And how many employers looked at LinkedIn? Is that really the key go-to?
I mean, Robyn will know this, but I can tell you that from working with search firms, which I do at my present organization and others, LinkedIn is the tool that people will go to find people. It's the #1 job search resource around. So employers look at it, search firms look at it, anyone looking to hire people, it's often one of the places they look. There's other places as well. There's a variety of job sites, etc. But LinkedIn is by far, I think, the most popular and most frequently used and has the broadest database of potential candidates. The advantage, obviously, of having that chronological type resume that looks like a LinkedIn profile looks like your resume is that people will understand it, it's easy to follow, etc. And that tends to be the advantage. LinkedIn tends to force you to put things in terms of a sequential chronological format. Now, how you describe things is up to you. But LinkedIn gives you a lot of options in terms of how to illustrate your talents, your skills. You can put videos that you've done, all kinds of things as part of your LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn can be part of your marketing campaign, and you can do a lot more via that LinkedIn page than you can with your resume, obviously, because that LinkedIn page can be a living document, again, with videos, presentations that you've done, links to articles, etc.
That's great. Thank you. Next question. Where I've been overwhelmed with where besides volunteering at physical locations is getting experience in various types of writing. The person has tried just signing up for various freelance websites, but doesn't find them particularly helpful. Is there some advice, Michael, you could give about exposure to writing and different kinds of writing skills?
Okay. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of places where you can do workshops to build your writing skills and everything else. There's a lot of places that need people to write. You can volunteer for different nonprofit organizations and write their newsletter. You can write op-ed pieces. You can create your own blog. So there's a lot of places where you can start building your own catalog of writing. And I would start getting out. Robyn's back, and she'll be off of mute in a moment. But no, there's a lot of places where you can go to build your writing skills and have a variety of writing that can be part of your portfolio. And the bigger your portfolio is, the easier it is to get your writing published, either in a place that it might be a less frequently known magazine or publication, and then you start building your way up toward those that are more prominent. And there's a lot of articles on the internet about how to go about doing that. Robyn, did you want to add to that at all?
The question, Robyn, was one of our participants is interested in getting more experience in various types of writing and has tried various freelance websites for writing, but has not found them helpful. And in terms of other sources you guys would recommend for building up a writing portfolio.
Yeah, so first of all, I apologize. I'm not sure what happened. I was frozen and yeah, so technical difficulties here. In terms of, writing experience, I'm glad he or she is trying the freelance websites because I think that could be good. Also, if you have a current position that you're in and you're trying to switch to writing, can you actually talk to somebody there about getting involved in a writing project, right? Are there actually things that you can do on the side after you finish your regular job that you kind of volunteer within your company, at your current employer, to kind of help you bridge that gap and to get more skills in terms of writing. And then you have, and also just doing writing samples on your own that you can then bring, like I mentioned, you know, bringing evidence to an interview. So doing that and being proactive is important.
And that's great. Do employers value seeing explicit volunteer experience, passion projects? And where do they get listed? Are they listed under work experience? Are they listed under volunteer service? What's the best way to represent meaningful volunteer leadership opportunities?
So I would say, if you don't mind, Michael, I'll jump in since I was mentioning this earlier. Yep. So yes, you definitely want to include volunteer experience. What I was trying to say about specifically when you're transitioning to a new career is that if that volunteer experience specifically speaks to the industry that you are looking to go into, and you really have to think about this because it might not, you know, be obvious at first. Like I have another friend who's been a Girl Scout leader forever, and she's looking to go into event management, right? And she was mentioning just like something about Girl Scouts, and I was like, well, you can include that on your resume as work experience, you know, so it doesn't have to be paid, first of all, right? Unpaid is completely fine for work experience. But think of all the events, you know, I think she was a Girl Scout leader for 7 years.
Wow.
Think of all the events, think of all the, you know, you can mention the age groups, you can mention, quantify it. So you can certainly mention stuff like that and put it into work experience. But if the question is, should I have a volunteer experience section as well? That's great. You know, there are things that might just need to stay in volunteer experience because they're not relevant for the job, but they still show, you know, how else you're involved. It gives it like a little bit more of a picture of who you are overall and where you're investing your time.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Oh my God, so many questions. What's the difference between the cover letter and the resume? That's the first. Let's do one question at a time. So what's the difference between the cover letter and the resume, and how does it work together?
So the cover letter is really focused more on it's a lot less of like a list, and it's more of giving the employer, it's a narrative. So it's telling them more about yourself, telling them why you're specifically interested in that employer. You're able to highlight things that maybe are not like specific work experiences, but that you would want to mention. And it typically has like 1 to 2 themes within a cover letter, just talking about like why you're interested, highlighting, summarizing some of your work experience, talking about other areas. Whereas a resume is much more like straightforward. You're not going to be able to get into, you know, how you feel about the future company, how you've done your research about the future company. That would be more in the cover letter. The resume is more about your accomplishments, and it's a lot more straightforward.
Okay. Michael, you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that explanation is excellent. And I just think that the cover letter allows you to convey a message to the employer about you and what you want to do and what you have to offer them. So that's where you can tailor that, offer that cover letter in a number of different ways to advance your candidacy.
And then in terms of your transferable skills, are they best in the cover letter or are they in the resume? How does one decide what goes kind of where, other than the resume, which lists, you know, employers?
So I would say both.
And both.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the questions, you know, if you ask a room of people, right, who are hiring, what do you read first, the cover letter or the resume? Half will say one, half will say the other, right? So you have to think about, you know, putting those really important points in both, because someone might read the cover letter and just say, oh, they don't have any transferable skills, like I won't read on, or they could do the same thing with resume.
Right.
So don't be shy about putting, you know, especially ones that are helping them connect the dots to this major career transition.
Okay.
You have to remember, those who are reading resumes or applicants, they're looking at large volumes of applicants for every job that's open. There's a lot of people applying. They may only give it 10 seconds or less. So you really have to capture their attention in both documents. So the stronger both documents are, the more likely it is that you'll be selected to go forward.
Related to this, well, not on the screen, but another question sent to me is, what about the big companies that use artificial intelligence to basically screen resumes and cover letters? Does that really happen? And how should someone prepare both the resume and cover letter, knowing maybe it gets sorted out by matching words and matching to the job description?
Robyn, I'll have you start if you want.
Yeah. So, it kind of goes back to what Michael talked about earlier, right? In the presentation is you're doing your research. So you're finding out what those keywords are. And then like I showed with my slides, you can, I showed like that product management sample going from sales to product management, including keywords like that. Obviously sometimes there's keywords you cannot just make up and put in your resume, but there's probably ones that do, that do have a connection between both what you've done in the past and the future position. So yeah, it's going to take some time to figure out what are the keywords, and if they have particular applicant tracking systems, they might be paying attention to that. So again, do the research to figure out what are those particular like buzzwords.
And this, what I'll also add is, this is where the networking becomes very important. Because if you can have someone on the other side who's looking for your resume, looking for your name, it will help you get through that system. If you're applying to Google, you might be applying with 1 million other people in the course of a year. That's how many applications they get for jobs. So it would help if you knew someone at Google who could go to the hiring manager and say, hey, look out for Jane Doe's resume, or look out for Johnny Harrison's resume. And that way they can go in there and look for that resume through all those applications. And so those are the things that will give you an advantage. And that's what you use the Yale Career Services Office, Strategy Office for. That's what you utilize the Yale Alumni Network for. And all the people that you know is, I'm interested in this organization. Do you know anyone who can help me get a connection there, or someone at the organization itself?
Thank you. Another question coming up. I think it's addressed really to OCS. The question is, can the alumni office help evaluate our LinkedIn profiles? I think the participant, I think it should be addressed to OCS. The alumni office doesn't work with LinkedIn profiles, but I think OCS might.
Yeah, but your career services office absolutely can. So I have appointments where they're just like, hey, Robyn, I want you to really look at my LinkedIn profile. And, just to highlight a couple things that I always say, make sure you have a picture. A lot of times people think they have a picture, and they do when they look at it, but have other people look at it. So like as a career advisor, I'll go in and I'm like, I can't see your picture. And they're like, oh, it's only for people that are in my current network. So even little things like that, the picture, and now you have that background photo. I would say for Yaleys, I say if you're not sure what to put for a background photo, there's tons of beautiful like Yale landscape, Yale pictures in OPAC. So just go to Yale OPAC and pick a picture that can be like in the background if you don't know what to put. Use the headline, right? Like take advantage of that. So, oh, there you go, Lisa. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So like, take the time to say, what do I want to say about myself? So if you're looking to transition to a new career, right there, instead of putting your position, your current position, you might put something like seeking position in XYZ and put the industry out there. And then at the top of that LinkedIn, you also have the ability to kind of write a little bit of a narrative. So you could even kind of address where you've been, where you're going, and then you want to treat the rest of it like a resume. You want to put those strong accomplishment statements. You also, with LinkedIn, which you can't do with a resume, is you can go as long as you want. So that's great. You don't want to tire the person out, but you want to put good details. And then you can also start to try to get recommendations. So talk to either current colleagues, former colleagues, faculty who can write you a recommendation for your LinkedIn profile. So those are just a couple of things I usually hit as high points in case that's helpful for the question.
Yeah, I think you guys have addressed this, but are really cover letters really helpful now? That people really read them or pay attention? If you don't have a cover letter, but you just send a note saying I'm interested, does your resume get thrown out, or does it really, you're not taken seriously? The person wants to know, are they really relevant?
If an employer is saying send a cover letter and resume, and you don't send that cover letter, then you're not listening to instructions. And I don't think that's the best way to start off.
Okay.
Employer. So that would be my recommendation.
Toss your resume in a minute. And if they show that you're inattentive to their instructions or don't follow them, they won't consider you, because other people will follow their instructions to the letter. Remember, whatever it is they're asking you to do, they're asking everyone to do, and you're competing with other people. So if 10 people do something and you choose not to, you stand out in a negative way. So I would put some attention to the cover letter. And there are some places that will make you not only do the cover letter, they'll also require you to answer a series of questions. And again, they're looking for your thought process, they're looking for your writing skills, whatever they're looking for. But if you don't do that well, you'll get eliminated as a candidate as well.
Oh, okay. In terms of, this is a good question for those a transition into a career who maybe hasn't had a career or taken some time off and decided to re-enter the workforce. And so they're updating their resume. And what do you do with those people who are mid to late career professionals? What do you do about dates, graduation dates, things that could profile your age? How do you list experience, especially if it was 10 years ago? How do you represent without being stereotyped or rejected because you're older? How do you signal that in a resume or represent it in a way that's not going to hurt you?
Robyn, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you always need to put the graduation date. So if your education, you know, if you're further out, then you could consider obviously keeping that date off if you're concerned about that. Are there projects you worked on, right? Are there things that you can do to kind of add some certifications to make it more updated? I mean, that's the part that you want to look at. I mean, if your first experience at the top of the resume is going to show that, you know, it was 10 years ago, then think about, well, what can I add to there, right? Have I been doing anything in terms of like the volunteer work that can be included? Could I get involved with, you know, some nonprofit board work, right? Like, so think about that as you're developing these materials. And it might be that, you know, you need to do that first, right? As you're looking, continue to build these other areas that you can add things. Yes, certifications, projects, you know, again, going back to what Michael said, that's also where the networking is going to be key. You know, you're going to have to rely on your network and to be talking to people.
And the thing I would add, I gave this example during the last webinar, so I apologize for repeating it, but there was an example of where someone I knew, she went through a divorce, and she was a stay-at-home mother of several children and had been home more than 10 years. But because of her extensive volunteer experience and volunteer experience on boards and involvement in setting up events and activities and major fundraising events, she was able to migrate from being all of a sudden a sole supporting parent to becoming a vice president of fundraising at a nonprofit organization, because she had the experience and she had the contacts. And now she is the CEO of not only the first nonprofit that she's been a CEO, but she's already also moved on to become the CEO of a larger nonprofit. And that was from not working for more than 10 years. So the key thing is, there's no problem with being off for whatever reason that you're off. What have you done with the time? Have you volunteered? Have you acquired additional skills? Have you built your portfolio of things that you're able to do in terms of transferable abilities and skills?
Okay, that's really valuable advice. But what do you do with these same related question, again, from an earlier participant, that you're going back to the workforce and the interviewer asks you, well, how do you work with younger people? Or how would you manage with your supervisor being younger than you are? Again, kind of age-related questions. How do you address those?
I think you give them examples of where you worked with younger people. I mean, if your reason that you took off time was to be a parent, maybe you were very involved in the school association, you worked with kids. Maybe you worked with younger people in one of your other volunteer activities. Just because you're not working doesn't mean you're not working with younger people. And I think any of us can explain how we would work with younger people. The key thing is you earn their respect, you get the work task done, you focus it on the work, not the age of the person that you're working for, and show that you would handle those differences professionally and that you wouldn't see where there would be a problem. And if there are examples of where you volunteered in organizations where you were under volunteer leaders who were younger, et cetera, provide those as examples.
Great advice.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I would just, to piggyback on that, you know, we talked a little bit before about the informational interviews, right? And so talking to a variety of ages of individuals who are working in this new industry is important. And some of the things that those informational interviews might come out of them, you might get some advice from like somebody who was younger or somebody, you know, that has a different perspective. And you can even allude to that and say, you know, I've been talking to a lot of people within this industry, because you care about this new industry, right? You're passionate about this new industry. You have that commonality. That's the important part. Like Mike was saying, you both want to do the work and you want to do good work. But maybe referencing like the different types of people that you spoke to about this industry when you're doing your research could be helpful.
Great advice. Back to the resume cover letter question. One page for both. One page for the cover letter, 2 page. What is there a rule of thumb?
Right? Yeah. I mean, for when I'm working with undergrads, we say 1 page cover letter, 1 page resume. When you are an alum and you have more experience, it is understandable that it's going to go to multiple pages. I don't know if Michael has any specifics about like, 2 to 3, how you want to do that. But, as you get older, obviously you're going to need multiple pages. So I know this particular audience has quite the range from, current students to alumni who are quite out. And that's fair, right? It's going to be different.
I don't have these artificial rules regarding the length of a resume. The resume is a marketing document. So it needs to be as long as it's most effective marketing you, your skills, your accomplishments. So if it's 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages, that's fine. The key thing you have to know is that if the first page does not grab your attention, it will not matter if there's a second or third page. So the key thing is every page needs to capture their attention and explain why you're the best candidate for a particular role. So the key thing, and I would say in that regard, have people look at your resume. It is the most important document in this entire process. Either go to OCS and have them take a look at it and give you advice and counsel. If you need to hire a resume writer, find a resume writer. But again, I would go to Office of Career Strategies and ask them for their advice on, hey, look at my resume. What do you think? This is what I'm trying to do. Does it highlight what I want to, where I want to go? Because if that resume doesn't reflect you well, everything else is going to be a lot harder.
Good advice. One of our panelists adds the comment that the experience has been that a referral is a must to get an interview, and it's critical to get hired. Wondered if that's really the rule of thumb in this day and age.
I will say that having a referral is very helpful. It could be a differentiator, but a lot of people get hired every year at organizations all across the country who did not get a referral. They did it based on their skills, and their resume came through and they got the attention of a search firm, or they applied directly, or etc. So, but ideally, if you have that and you can also get a referral, that would be an ideal and very powerful combination, that you have the ideal background and you also have a referral. But it's not the only way. And some places you're not going to have anyone to refer you. It might be a company that you don't have anyone that you know at all who works there. Robyn, I'm sorry.
No, I completely agree. So on LinkedIn, there's a Yale alumni LinkedIn page. If you search for, so I love this page. If you search in terms of referrals, I'm thinking of like contacts, right? If you're on LinkedIn and you search for Yale University, then you pull up the Yale University School page. And on the left, there's something that says alumni. And if you click on that, you can see all the Yale alums who have, or anyone who has put Yale in as their education, right? So that means alumni from all the various schools at any age. And that can be a great place to search if you're like, I can't find anyone. So obviously we talk a lot about the Yale network, but Yale alumni LinkedIn page, definitely you can plug in a company name there. And I'm not saying it has everyone, but last time I looked, which was earlier today in an advising appointment, there was about 127,000 alumni that are there. So you can filter that and look for folks there. Cross campus is another great way. YAA has done a stellar job. They're really building cross campus with alumni, and students are going in there. So try. And then, if you can't find someone from the Yale network and you've already tried friends and family, you can also just try to find even a recruiter, and that can just take some savvy research skills.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me just add, in addition to cross campus, and I'm glad, Robyn, you brought that up. That's a really important source. There are like 11,000 alumni and students there now, and it's basically for mentoring and networking, which is really, really important. And you can look by industry, by type by group. There are several groups there. 1stGenYale has a group there. But the thing I also want to contribute is we have a brand new, which was started actually a month ago, given the pandemic and given the incredible need for jobs. We started a new Facebook group called Yale Alumni Marketplace, which is for any alumni and any, it'll be for students eventually. Right now it's for graduating. It'll be for students their senior year, the second semester of their senior year. They have to be in the Yale Alumni Directory, which they're not in as of yet. But right now, we have opportunities there for alumni to post jobs, what they're looking for, services, anything that they're doing in their business world, promoting their own art, literature, theater, you name it, any public businesses, private businesses, and those looking for employment. So if people are looking for a job and you're a Yale alum, join Yale Alumni Marketplace, and we have, I think, 1,300 right now in 3 weeks. So join us, and you'll be able to look through and see the kind of opportunities. They range from alumni who own farms and are selling produce to award-winning authors, to major consultants, major companies are on there through the Yale alumni. So that's just something I want to throw out as a new opportunity that isn't yet really being promoted widely, but it's a closed Facebook group for Yale alumni of all schools. So let me go back to the questions we have. If you know someone's direct email at a company organization, but you really don't know them well, but they're the manager of where you want to work, how aggressively do you pursue them? How did you contact them directly, or do you go through HR? How do you know of a job opportunity, but how do you make it happen?
Well, I will generally say that if you can contact the manager, it's always a good thing to be able to do. I mean, but you don't want to harass them. If you harass them, you'll turn them off, and then your candidacy is dead. But you also want to go through the regular HR process as well, because if you don't do that side, then you end up sometimes with the HR people getting upset, and that will not be helpful either. But the key thing is to write a cover letter, letting them know that you're interested in the job, why, and showing them very succinctly in terms of what it is you have to offer, and then attach your resume and then go from there. Robyn, what do you think?
Yeah, that's it. I say do both, right? So I'll say you got to go through the regular portal, right? You're not above that. So definitely go through the HR or whatever the way is to submit the application. But then if you happen to find somebody, that's great, like an actual person, because I hear a lot from folks who are like, oh, I just feel like I sent my resume to like a black hole, and that's frustrating. So if you can find a contact, then also reach out to them. And what I always say is in that email, let them know that you've already applied through the other, like dear so-and-so, I wanted to reach out. I've already applied through your website on X page for the position XYZ, but I also wanted to reach out to you directly and, just send my materials forward because I'm really interested in the position. And like Michael said, you don't want to, badger the person, but it's not a bad thing to go through the portal, but then also just kind of put your resume into their inbox as well. Because they might be getting hundreds of applications, hundreds of resumes. And if you've taken the time to find their contact information, I say go for it.
That's good. And Michael, can you just highlight the role of HR? I think a lot of people on this and who will be watching it when it's published, in terms of the role of HR, the role of a hiring manager, how does it all work out?
Well, essentially, hiring managers over the years have become increasingly challenged in terms of doing all the functions they have to do at work. So the HR department, what the hiring manager does, they have a need. Someone left, someone retired, they got a new headcount, whatever it is, and they want to fill that. So their job is to define what the skills, qualifications, and competencies are for that position. What human resources does is confirm what should the salary range be, confirm the title and all those kinds of things. They advertise it, and if they're resourced properly, they pre-screen the applicant. So the manager doesn't have time to look at 1,000 resumes. It's up to the HR person to narrow that down to, hey, these are the top 7 or 8 candidates that you may want to take a look at. They provide those resumes often to the manager, And the manager may decide whether of those 7 or 10 people, okay, I'm going to interview these 3 or 4. But usually what the HR department does is that pre-screening process. And if you don't make it through the HR process, it will never get to the manager. So that's the role of HR. That's why it's fairly important that you have all those things together in terms of your resume, your cover letter, and everything else.
Thank you. Good. Robyn, do you want to add to that?
No, I mean, basically, I think Michael put that best because that's his field. I would just say that that's one reason why, if you do know the hiring manager, in case you might not make it through the HR screening, also write to the HR manager, right? So that you're trying these 2 ways. Because I've heard of crazy stories where people who were super qualified for positions, for some reason, just got booted from the portal. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't have the right keyword or something. Not to blame HR, right? But they're just dealing with hundreds of applications. So yeah, that's why going at both those ankles is certainly helpful.
Yep.
And what about the next question on the chat is about what about the larger companies that have their own recruiters internally who go out and try to find the people to fill those jobs? Do you reach out to the recruiter if you know the recruiter? Do you apply anyway? What do you do if there's an internal recruiting staff?
I mean, my view is that if you know the recruiter, you can reach out to them directly. I would go ahead and do it. I mean, what they're doing, a lot of people brought their recruiting in-house because they don't want to pay the fees that are associated with search firms. They want to have more control over the process. They want to have their own team become deeply familiar with the various operations of their organization so they can go out and represent that organization the best way possible. So if you know someone who's doing that, I would definitely contact them. And that would be an advantage if you can get in contact directly with one of the company's recruiters. Or if they reach out to you, I'll definitely respond because that means they're serious. That means they've gone through the work of finding you on LinkedIn or through whatever methods they've used, and they've identified you as a candidate for an opening that they have. So the key thing is respond very quickly, provide them what they needed, and be available to speak with them. Robyn?
Yeah, I think that I don't have anything more to add to that. I think that makes complete sense.
Okay. One more question, and then I think we have about time for a couple more questions, but this one will be first. What steps can we take to make sure informational interviews are productive and considerate of the person's time, whether it's on phone or on Zoom or eventually back in person?
I'm happy to take that. So I love that, first of all, whoever asked that is considering that, because that's important. I've heard from a lot of folks with everything going on with the pandemic that they're not sure if they should reach out for informational interviews. And I will just say that from alumni I've spoken to and just other industry experts, they've said, no, continue to reach out to us for informational interviews, because a lot of people want to help during this time, right? And they can't necessarily, if they can't give money or they're not sure what to do, they can give advice, right? They can give 30 minutes of their time. So, I always make the suggestion, you ask for like 20, 25 minutes of somebody's time, because the fact of the matter is then they'll end up carving out in their calendar a half an hour, so you get a full half an hour. Worst case, you get 20, which isn't bad. But obviously, you want to pitch yourself in an informational interview request and explain why you're interested in talking to the person. You want to give a very brief highlight about yourself. You don't want to go on and on and on. So I always say just one paragraph. And then you can always include your LinkedIn profile, include the actual link so they can kind of find out more about you. You do want to prepare in advance. You never know where an informational interview is going to go. I have spoken to people who have actually been offered jobs from informational interviews. So you want to be prepared. You never know. They might be so impressed, or they might have just thought the conversation, could go a different way. So you want to be prepared. You want to have specific questions. The link that I included at the end of my presentation on that last page, that has that informational interviews page has a lot about sample questions. I mean, I think there's 20 sample questions on that page. You're going to have your own questions though, right? I mean, if you're taking the time to look into a brand new career, then you are doing your research. You have questions, right? You can also show off what you have learned, right? So you might be asking questions based on the fact that you learned certain things about the industry, you learned certain things about their company, you want to learn more. When I talk to folks about informational interviews, they're like, oh, I feel awkward about it, but then when they start to do them, they kind of get in a rhythm. So I always say, give yourself a goal. If you're looking, do 1 to 2, try to do 1 to 2 a week. and they actually end up loving it. That's actually a really nice way to break up the job search, which can get very tedious, right? Just applying for jobs. But in terms of making it productive, you know, you do your research, you have planned questions, you look up, you know, and when you do your research, I'm also talking about like looking up about the individual and the company. So you look at their LinkedIn profile, you find out anything about them that you can. You also look overall about like what department they're in, so that you can ask a variety of questions. And, you know, you also can ask really simple questions like, what would you do if you were in my shoes? And you know, have been out of work for 10 years, but this is the industry you really want to go into. You know, you can have honest conversations with them.
And the one thing I would add to that would be, if you have 20 minutes and you organize yourself so that you ask your most important questions first, because you have to assume for the unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
What if that person gets interrupted halfway through and you saved your most important question as your last question? Then you don't get to ask it. So the key thing is utilize that time as well as you can. Ask your most important question first, your second most important question, and just utilize that time as you go through, and then have backup questions in case the person gives you more time. But be prepared and be organized.
And isn't the best last question something like, I was wondering if there's someone else you would recommend that I should see or contact or read, or kind of a follow-on, is there some, what would you do if you're in my situation, right? Is that the best way to kind of end it?
That would be a great way to, if you can get a referral to somebody else, that would be a great thing in terms of informational interviews.
Yes, this has been incredibly helpful. You know, thank you so much. After pointing out these, you know, this area, I'm even more excited about the possibility of going into this industry. I'm just curious, do you have anybody else you suggest I speak to?
That's great. That's great. I see that it's 8:15. I want to see if there are any more questions in the chat. Anybody else want to just quickly send a comment or two? One of the things I just wrote, are there topics for future webinars related to finding a job or career transitions you would like Robyn and Michael to come back? They've been great. This is our second, and I'm just honored you guys are doing such a fantastic job through these webinars. So if we're not going to have any more questions, then I want to just thank the panelists. I want to thank Michael and Robyn for your time and energy and incredible advice on so many levels, helping us through finding a job, changing jobs, where we need to go. I put in the chat, Robyn, the Office of Career Strategy email, careerstrategy@yale.edu, for any of the Yale alums who would like to contact any of the staff. You guys are still working, you know, year round, and you're doing it from home wonderfully. And so I want alumni to know that there you have access as well as the resources on your page. I also want to thank all the panelists, all the participants who showed up, and all the people who signed up to get, I guess, a recording of this to see it at a later date. And I just think it's been an honor and a pleasure to host you guys. And I just want to know if you have any closing remarks, Michael or Robyn.
Well, the closing remark I would make is that changing careers is possible. There's a lot of people who've done it. And with a plan and a strategy, you can make it happen for yourself as well. And utilize the Office of Career Strategy. It's one of the most valuable resources that you have as a member of the Yale community. It is a place where I cannot be more thankful for. They helped me start my career, and they have excellent resources for both undergraduates as well as alumni. So I would contact them and stay in touch with them and ask for their help.
Great, thank you. Robyn?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, you know, if you feel like there's a reason for a change, you know, and you've taken the time to look into what that change is, and you feel really strongly about it, you need to go for it, right? The worst thing is to have a regret. So if you've done that research and you've talked to people and you're motivated, there's a reason why, you know, your gut keeps saying that this is what you should be looking into. So again, if you've been thorough about it and you've been thoughtful and if you've reflected on why, then it's going to happen for you, right? But it's not going to be an easy process. And that's why, you know, our office is happy to support you, as well as the other career services offices. So whichever Yale school you are a part of, you know, obviously you want to reach out to that career services office and we can help you.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And yes, we will be emailing the links and the recording to those who participated. So thank you very much. And again, Michael and Robyn, appreciate all your good work, and we wish you a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.